This isn't your home anymore. The coffee maker died at exactly 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, which seemed about right for how my life was going. I stood there, in my boxers and a ratty MITT, staring at the machine like it might resurrect itself through sheer force of my disappointment. That's when my phone buzzed with a credit card alert. That made my stress level spike higher than the caffeine I wasn't getting. Charge $847.50. Lakeside Resort and Spa, Burlington, Vermont. My wife Marina was supposed to be in Boston for a client presentation. Last I checked, Boston wasn't in Vermont, and her advertising agency sure as heck didn't have an $847 per night entertainment budget. I'm Nate Morrison, 41 years old, and I fix other people's computer problems for a living. I've got a decent eye for patterns, inconsistencies, and things that don't add up. Right now, my marriage was throwing up more red flags than a Soviet parade. Fi called Marina's cell. It went straight to voicemail, which was becoming a disturbing trend. Her voice, crisp and professional, even in recording, told me to leave a message. I didn't. Instead, I opened our banking app and started scrolling. What I found made my stomach drop like a stone into dark water. 3 more charges over the past week, all at places she'd never mentioned. A jewelry store in Manchester, a high-end restaurant in Hanover, and something called Intimate Apparel Boutique that cost more than my monthly gym membership. The front door opened with Marina's familiar click of heels on hardwood. She walked into the kitchen, looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Perfectly styled auburn hair, designer suit that probably costs more than my car payment, and that practiced smile she wore for difficult clients. "You're up late," she said, not quite meeting my eyes as she set down her leather briefcase. "Coffee maker's dead," I replied, holding up my phone. "But that's not the most interesting thing that died tonight." Her smile faltered. "What do you mean, Vermont?" "Marina. Really, when did Boston relocate to Vermont?" The color drained from her face, but she recovered quickly. Marina had always been good at damage control. It's what made her successful in advertising. "It's complicated, Nate. The client wanted to meet at a different location. Last-minute change for $850 a night. Must be some client. You're checking up on me now." Her voice turned cold, defensive. "When did you become so controlling?" That word hit me like a slap. Controlling is what she'd been calling me lately whenever I asked basic questions about where she was going or when she'd be home. Apparently, giving a single thought about your spouse's whereabouts was now considered toxic behavior. "I'm not controlling, Marina. I'm confused. There's a difference." She moved to the refrigerator, pulling out a bottle of wine. Like this conversation required liquid courage. "I can't do this anymore, Nate." "Do what?" "This." She gestured vaguely between us. "The suspicion, the interrogation, every time I come home. The way you look at me, like I'm some kind of criminal. Maybe, if you stopped acting like one, I'd stop looking at you like one." The wine glass slammed down on the counter, hard enough that I was surprised. It didn't shatter. "That's exactly what I'm talking about. You've already made up your mind about me, haven't you?" "Have I? Because from where I'm standing, the evidence is pretty damning." Marina turned to face me fully, and for a moment, I saw something in her eyes that looked almost like relief, like she was tired of carrying around whatever secret she'd been hiding. "You want the truth, Nate?" "Fine. Yes, I was in Vermont. Yes, I spent the night at an expensive resort. And no, it wasn't for work." The admission hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. I'd been expecting it, but hearing it out loud still felt like taking a punch to the solar plexus. "Who is he?" "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She poured herself a generous glass of wine and took a long sip before answering. "Derek Ashford." The name hit me like a freight train. Derek Ashford, her business partner at the agency. Derek Ashford, who'd been coming to our house for dinner parties and barbecues for the past 3 years. Derek Ashford, who'd shaken my hand at last year's Christmas party and told me how lucky I was to have such an amazing wife. A long 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies, of fake business trips, and mysterious charges and cold shoulders in bed. Half a year of me thinking I was losing my mind, that maybe I really was becoming controlling and paranoid. "I want a divorce," she said quietly. "Yeah," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. I bet you do. She finished her wine in one long gulp and headed for the stairs. At the bottom step, she turned back. I'll be staying at Laya's for a while. We can figure out the details later. Laya, Brennan, her best friend since college. Another person who'd sat at my dinner table and smiled to my face while knowing exactly what Marina was doing behind my back. After Marina disappeared upstairs, I sat in my kitchen until dawn, staring at my phone and trying to process the complete implosion of my life. By the time the sun came up, I'd made a decision. If Marina wanted to play games, I'd play games. But I'd been fixing broken systems for 20 years, and I knew how to find the cracks in anything. I was going to find out exactly how deep this betrayal went. Jules Martino looked like someone who'd seen too much of the world's ugly side, and decided to charge people for the privilege of seeing it. 250, some gray hair, pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a leather jacket that had definitely seen better decades. The private investigator came highly recommended by my lawyer, who'd warned me that Jules was expensive, but thorough. Your wife's not very good at covering her tracks, Jules said, sliding a manila folder across the table of Murphy's bar, the kind of dive where nobody asked questions, and the beer was cheap enough to drown your sorrows without breaking the bank. I opened the folder and immediately wished I hadn't. Photos of Marina and Derek at the Vermont resort, holding hands by the lake. Marina laughing at something Derek was saying, her head thrown back in genuine joy, an expression I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Derek's hand on the small of her back as they walked into the hotel. There's more, Jules said, taking a sip of whiskey that probably costs more than my lunch. The next batch of photos showed them at restaurants I'd never heard of, shopping together at boutiques in Manchester, and entering what looked like a very expensive jewelry store. The timestamp showed this had been going on for exactly as long as Marina had admitted. 6 months of systematic deception. The interesting part isn't the affair, Jules continued. It's the money trail. What do you mean? Your wife's been spending a lot more than just hotel rooms and fancy dinners. She opened a credit card in your name 3 months ago, ran up about $15,000 in debt that you don't know about. Yet, my blood went cold. That's identity theft. Technically, yes, but proving it when you're married is tricky. She had access to all your personal information, and spousal fraud is hard to prosecute. Jules pulled out another set of documents, credit card statements, showing charges I'd never seen before, designer clothes, expensive meals, a weekend trip to Montreal, and something that made my stomach lurch, a charge to a medical clinic for $800. What's this one? I asked, pointing to the medical charge. Jules's expression grew grim. That's where it gets complicated, Nate. The clinic specializes in women's reproductive health, based on the timing and the amount. I'd guess it was for a procedure she didn't want you to know about. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Marina had gotten pregnant, whether by me or Derek, I'd never know, and had terminated the pregnancy without saying a word, using my money to pay for it. Jesus Christ. It gets worse. Your wife's been meeting with a divorce attorney for the past month. She's planning to take you for everything she can get, claiming you were emotionally manipulative and controlling. She's building a case that you isolated her from friends and monitored her every move. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Isolated her from friends. Her friends have been helping her lie to me for months. Speaking of friends, you should know that Laya Brennan has been actively encouraging this affair. I've got text messages between them where Laya is pushing Marina to leave you and follow her. Heart. With Derek. Jules slid a phone across the table. Marina's old iPhone that she'd apparently thrown away when she upgraded. Found this in their dumpster. Amazing what people think is permanently deleted. I scrolled through the recovered text messages, each one a fresh knife to the gut. Laya. You deserve to be happy, Marina. Nate's been holding you back for years. Marina. I know, but it's complicated. The house, the finances. Laya, Derek can take care of you. He's successful, ambitious, everything. Nate isn't. Marina. Sometimes I think about what my life would be like if I'd never married him. Laya. It's not too late to find out. The messages went on for pages with Laya systematically poisoning Marina against me, while encouraging her to pursue Derek, It was like watching a slow-motion assassination of my marriage, orchestrated by someone I'd considered a friend. Why? I asked. Why would Laya do this? Jules shrugged. People have their reasons. Maybe she's jealous of what you and Marina had. Maybe she's got her own agenda. Either way, she's been pulling the strings on this whole thing. I closed the phone and pushed it back across the table. What do you recommend? Legally, document everything, protect your assets, and prepare for a nasty divorce. She's going to try to destroy you, financially and personally and unofficially. Jules grinned, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like I had an ally. Unofficially, your wife and her friends have been playing a game where they know all the rules and you don't. Time to change the rules. That night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by printouts of bank statements, credit reports, and text messages. Marina was still staying at and the house felt like a mausoleum full of memories of a life that had apparently been a lie. I started making lists. Marina's vulnerabilities, Derek's pressure points, Laya's secrets. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd show them what dirty really looked like. But first, I needed to understand exactly how deep this conspiracy went, and I needed to protect myself from whatever legal and financial ambush they were planning. I opened my laptop and started typing. If Marina wanted to paint me as threatening and controlling, she'd need evidence. Time to make sure that evidence told the right story. The game was just beginning. The Pinnacle Advertising Agency occupied the top 3 floors of a gleaming glass tower downtown, the kind of building that screamed success and charged accordingly. I'd been there dozens of times, for Marina's office parties and client events, always feeling slightly out of place among the creative types with their expensive haircuts and ironic vintage clothing. Today, I felt perfectly at home. I'd spent the past week putting my plan into motion. First, I'd legally separated our finances, moving my direct deposits to a new account that Marina couldn't access. Then had canceled the credit card she'd been using for her affair, which had resulted in a furious phone call that I'd let go to voicemail. But the real masterstroke was the anonymous tip I'd sent to the agency's biggest client, Hartwell Industries, along with photos of Marina and Derek's romantic getaways. Apparently, Hartwell's CEO was a conservative family man who didn't appreciate his advertising team using company funds for extramarital affairs. The elevator dinged as I reached the 20th floor, where Marina's corner office overlooked the city. Through the glass walls, I could see her in an animated discussion with Derek and their boss, Mr. Kim. From their body language, it wasn't going well. Nate, Marina's assistant Jessica, looked surprised to see me. Marina's in a meeting right now. That's okay, I'll wait. I settled into one of the uncomfortable modern chairs in the reception area and pulled out my phone. Jules had sent me another batch of text messages recovered from Marina's phone, including some particularly damaging exchanges with Derek about how they were going to handle their Nate problem after the divorce. The meeting broke up 20 minutes later, with Derek storming out and Mr. Kim looking like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. Marina emerged, looking pale and shaken. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "We need to talk." She glanced around the office, clearly not wanting to make a scene in front of her coworkers. "Fine. My office." Marina's office was a shrine to her success. Awards on the walls, photos with celebrities and politicians, and a view that probably added 50 grand to the rent. She closed the door and turned to face me. "If you're here to cause problems, Nate, I'll call security. Relax. I'm just here to return something that belongs to you." I pulled out a small velvet jewelry box and set it on her desk. Marina's face went white. "Where did you get that?" "Same place you did. Brennan Jewelers, in Manchester." Funny thing about expensive jewelry stores, they keep very detailed records of their transactions, including the fact that you bought this with a credit card in my name. The necklace inside was beautiful. A delicate gold chain with a diamond pendant that had cost $3,000. Based on the text messages Jules had recovered, it was a gift Derek had surprised her with, using my money to pay for it. "That's not what happened," Marina said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Really? Because I've got the receipt right here, along with the credit card statement. Want to explain to me how Derek managed to surprise you with jewelry that I technically bought? Marina sank into her chair, the fight going out of her. How did you find out about the card? I find out about everything. Eventually, Marina, it's what I do for a living. I solve problems and find patterns. Your affair was just another system to crack. You're enjoying this, aren't you? She said bitterly. Enjoying it. My wife of 12 years has been systematically stealing from me while sleeping with my friend. No, Marina, I'm not enjoying this. I'm surviving it. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope, setting it next to the jewelry box. What's that? Divorce papers. I'm filing first, and I'm filing for cause. Adultery, financial fraud, and emotional cruelty. I've got documentation for all of it. Marina's hands shook as she opened the envelope and scanned the first page. Emotional cruelty. You're the one who's been spying on me, tracking my movements, protecting myself from a wife who was robbing me blind. There's a difference. Nate, please, we can work this out. The affair, it was a mistake. I was confused, and Laya kept pushing me too. Don't, I held up a hand. Don't blame Laya for your choices. You're a grown woman who decided to betray her husband and steal his money. Own it. Marina started crying, but they were angry tears, not sad ones. You have no idea what it's been like, living with someone who treats me like a roommate instead of a wife. When was the last time you told me you loved me? When was the last time you planned a romantic evening, or bought me flowers, or made me feel like I mattered? The accusation stung because there was truth in it. We'd grown apart over the years, settled into comfortable routines that had apparently become comfortable prisons for her. So you decided to fix our marriage by sleeping with Derek and stealing my money. I decided to find someone who actually wanted to be with me, using my credit card to finance it. Marina wiped her eyes, smearing her perfect makeup. What do you want, Nate? Money. The house. Just tell me what it'll take to make this go away quietly. It's too late for quiet. Marina, your boyfriend Derek is about to lose his biggest client because of your affair. Mr. Kim looked pretty unhappy when I walked in. And Laya, I smiled. Well, let's just say her husband, Tom, is going to be very interested in some of the text messages she's been sending you. Wouldn't I already did? Turns out Tom's been suspicious about Laya's late nights and girls' trips for months. Amazing how helpful he became when I showed him evidence that his wife has been actively sabotaging other people's marriages. Marina's face went ashen. Nate, please don't destroy other people's lives because you're angry witty me. I'm not destroying anything, Marina. I'm just letting the truth come to light. If that destroys lives, maybe those lives were built on lies to begin with. I stood up and headed for the door. You've got 72 hours to respond to the divorce papers. After that, everything becomes public record. Wait. Marina's voice was small, defeated. What about us? 12 years of marriage. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I turned back to look at her. This woman I'd once loved enough to promise my life to. She looked smaller, somehow diminished by the weight of her choices. It meant everything to me. Marina, that's why this hurts so much. I left her there in her glass office, surrounded by the symbols of her success, crying over the wreckage of the life she'd thrown away. For a few months of excitement with a man who was probably already planning his exit strategy, the elevator ride down felt like descending from a great height, leaving behind the rarefied air of Marina's world and returning to the ground level where consequences lived. My phone buzzed with a text from Jules. Tom Brennan wants to meet tonight, 8 p.m. Bar, says he has information you'll want to hear. I smiled grimly. The game was accelerating, and all the players were finally being forced to show their cards. Time to see what other secrets this conspiracy had been hiding. Tom Brennan looked like a man who'd been punched in the gut and was still trying to catch his breath. He sat across from me at Murphy's bar, nursing a whiskey, with the kind of careful attention that suggested it wasn't his first. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit wrinkled, and his eyes had the hollow look of someone whose world had just collapsed. She played me, he said without preamble. My own wife played me like a ridiculous fiddle. I'd known Tom for almost as long as I'd known Laya. They'd been married for 15 years, had 2 kids, and from the outside appeared to have the perfect suburban life. Tom was an architect, successful and steady, the kind of guy who coached Little League and never missed a parent-teacher conference. "What did you find?" I asked. Tom pulled out his phone and showed me a series of text messages. "After you showed me those messages between Laya and Marina, I started digging deeper. Turns out my loving wife has been planning this whole thing for a lot longer than 6 months. The messages were damning conversations between Laya and Derek, dating back over a year, discussing Marina's marriage and how unhappy she seemed. Laya systematically feeding Derek information about Marina's schedule, her interests, her vulnerabilities." "Jesus," I muttered, scrolling through the texts. "She was setting them up. It gets worse." Tom's voice was bitter. "Remember that work conference Marina went to in Chicago last spring? The one where she supposedly met Derek for the first time as business partners?" I nodded. Marina had come back from that conference full of excitement about new projects and opportunities. Flair arranged the whole thing. She knew Derek was going to be there. Knew Marina would be vulnerable after that fight you two had about money. She practically threw them together. The fight he was referring to had been about Marina's spending habits. Nothing major, just the usual marital disagreement about budgets and priorities. But apparently, Laya had seen it as an opportunity. "Why?" I asked. "Why would she do this to Marina? To us?" Tom's laugh was harsh. "Because she hates you, Nate. Has for years, and she was jealous of Marina's marriage. Hates me. What did I ever do to Laya? Remember about 5 years ago, when Flair was up for that big promotion at her marketing firm, the creative director position. I vaguely remembered Laya being stressed about some work situation, but the details were fuzzy. She was presenting a campaign that she claimed was her original concept, except it wasn't. She'd stolen the idea from a smaller agency and was passing it off as her own work." The memory came flooding back. I'd been doing some freelance IT work for Laya's company, helping them upgrade their servers, when I'd stumbled across the original campaign files. The metadata clearly showed they'd been created by someone else at a different company, months before Laya's supposed brainstorm. I had to report it. I said it was plagiarism. If the client had found out later, you cost her the promotion. Heck, you almost cost her the job entirely. She's never forgiven you for that. Tom showed me more messages. These ones between Laya and her sister, discussing her long-term plan to get revenge on me for ruining her career. Laya, "Nate thinks he's so righteous, so perfect. Wait until he finds out what it feels like to lose everything. Sister, you're really going to destroy Marina's marriage just to get back at her husband. Laya, Marina deserves better than Nate anyway. I'm doing her a favor. She's been working on this for years." Tom continued, "Slowly poisoning Marina against you, pointing out every flaw in your marriage, making her feel unappreciated and trapped. When Derek came along, she just accelerated the timeline. I felt sick. My marriage hadn't died from natural causes. It had been destroyed slowly and deliberately by someone I'd trusted." "There's more," Tom said grimly. "The credit card fraud, the secret spending. That was Laya's idea too. She convinced Marina that you'd never notice that you deserve to pay for Marina's liberation. And Derek, was he in on it?" "Derek's just a useful idiot. Rich, charming, and stupid enough to think he was sweeping Marina off her feet through his own irresistible charm. Laya fed him information about Marina's favorite restaurants, for jewelry preferences, even her schedule. He thought he was being the perfect lover, but Laya was writing the script." Tom finished his whiskey and signaled for another. "The worst part, Laya was planning to do the same thing to our marriage. She's been having an affair with her personal trainer for months, building up to asking me for a divorce. She wanted both of us destroyed so she could start fresh without any reminders of her failures." The scope of Laya's manipulation was breathtaking. She'd orchestrated the destruction of 2 marriages, ruined multiple lives, and convinced everyone they were making their own choices. "What are you going to do?" I asked. Tom's smile was cold. "Same thing you're doing. I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who Laya Brennan really is. He pulled out a tablet and showed me a website he'd been building, a detailed timeline of Laya's deceptions, complete with screenshots of text messages, photos, and documented evidence of her affairs and manipulations. I'm launching this tomorrow morning, sending the link to everyone in our social circle, her coworkers, her family. By the time I'm done, Laya won't be able to show her face in this town. It was brutal, thorough, and completely justified. Laya had destroyed lives for petty revenge, and now she was going to face the consequences. What about Marina and Derek? What about them? They made their choices, even if they were manipulated into making them. Marina still stole from you, still lied to you, still betrayed her vows. Derek still slept with a married woman. The fact that Laya was pulling the strings doesn't absolve them of responsibility. Tom was right, but I still felt a strange sadness for Marina. She'd been played as much as I had, turned into a tool against her own marriage by someone she'd trusted. I want Laya to know it was us, I said. I want her to know. We figured out her game. Tom grinned. Already planned. She's meeting me for coffee tomorrow morning to discuss our marriage problems. I'm going to show her the website right before it goes live. We shook hands. Two men who'd discovered they'd been fighting the wrong enemy. The real villain had been hiding in plain sight, disguising her malice as friendship and concern. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Marina. We need to talk. There are things about Laya you don't know. I almost laughed. After everything Tom had just shown me, Marina was finally ready to tell me the truth about her best friend's manipulation. Too little, too late. But maybe it was time for one final conversation. One last chance to see if there was anything left of the woman I'd married beneath the lies and betrayal. The end game was approaching, and all the players were finally going to be in the same room. The lakeside mansion, where it all started, was scheduled for foreclosure in 2 weeks. Derek had bought it the previous year as an investment property in Love Nest, but the loss of his biggest clients and his suspension from the agency had left him unable to make the payments. The irony was perfect. The scene of my marriage's death would soon be demolished, just like everything else in this mess. I'd arranged for everyone to meet here under the pretense of a final settlement discussion. Marina thought we were going to work out the divorce terms quietly. Derek thought Marina had convinced me to sell him my half of some non-existent joint investment. Laya thought she was coming to support Marina through a difficult negotiation with her estranged husband. None of them knew that Tom and I had spent the past week preparing for this moment. The mansion sat on 5 acres of pristine lakefront property, the kind of place that screamed new money and questionable taste. Derek had decorated it like a movie set, all white leather and glass with abstract art that probably cost more than most people's cars. It was the perfect backdrop for what was about to happen. I arrived first, letting myself in with the key. Derek had given Marina months ago. The security system was still active, which meant I could monitor everyone's arrival and control access to the property. Sometimes it paid to be the IT guy. Marina showed up at exactly 7 p.m., driving her BMW and looking nervous. She dressed carefully for this meeting. Professional, but not cold. Attractive, but not seductive. She was still trying to manage the optics, still believing she could control the narrative. "Thank you for agreeing to meet here," she said, as she entered the foyer. "I know this must be difficult." "You have no idea," I replied. Derek arrived 10 minutes later, his usual swagger dampened by recent events. The loss of the Hartwell account had been a major blow to his reputation, and rumors about his affair with a married client were making the rounds in the industry. He nodded curtly at me and went to stand beside Marina, a gesture of solidarity that would have been touching if it weren't built on lies. Laya was the last to arrive, and she looked terrible. Tom had confronted her that morning with evidence of her and the stress was showing. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes, and her hands shook slightly as she set down her purse. "All right," Marina said. Once everyone was assembled in the main living room, "let's try to handle this like adults. Nate, what are your terms?" I walked over to the massive wall-mounted TV and connected my laptop. Before we talk terms, I think everyone should see what we're really dealing with. The first image that appeared on the screen was a text message between Laya and Derek from 18 months ago. Marina seems really unhappy with Nate lately. Maybe you should ask her about it. At the Chicago conference, Laya went pale. Where did you get that? The same place I got these, I said, clicking to the next image. More text messages, emails, and photos showing the systematic campaign to destroy my marriage. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Marina stared at the screen in shock. Laya, what is this? I can explain, Laya started, but I cut her off. No need. It's all pretty self-explanatory. For the past 2 years, your best friend has been orchestrating the destruction of your marriage as revenge for a work incident that happened 5 years ago. I clicked through more evidence. Laya's affair with her trainer, her plans to divorce Tom, her detailed timeline for breaking up both marriages. With each revelation, Marina's face grew more horrified, and Derek looked more confused. You used me, Marina said to Laya, her voice barely above a whisper. I was trying to help you, Laya protested. You were miserable with Nate. You deserved better. By manipulating me into having an affair, by convincing me to steal from my husband. Derek finally found his voice. Wait, you were feeding me information about Marina, those restaurant recommendations, the jewelry she liked. You wouldn't have had a chance with her otherwise, Laya snapped, her mask finally slipping. Marina was too loyal, too committed to her boring marriage. She needed a push. A push. Marina's voice was rising. You destroyed my life. You made me into someone I don't even recognize. The room erupted in accusations and denials, exactly as I'd planned. I let them tear each other apart for a few minutes before clicking to the final slide. It was a screenshot of a website titled The Truth About Laya Brennan, complete with every piece of evidence Tom and I had gathered. The URL was prominently displayed at the bottom of the screen. This goes live in exactly 1 hour. I announced it's being sent to everyone. In your social circles, your coworkers, your families. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know exactly what kind of person you really are. Laya lunged for my laptop, but I'd anticipated that. I closed it and stepped back, smiling. Too late. It's automated. Even if you destroy this laptop, the website still launches. You bastard, Laya snarled. You self-righteous, vindictive bastard. You think you're so perfect, but you're just as petty and cruel as anyone else. You're right, I agreed. I am petty and cruel. The difference is I'm honest about it. I'm not pretending this is for anyone's good but my own. Marina was crying now, the full weight of her situation finally hitting her. Nate, please. I know I made mistakes, but I was manipulated. Laya used my feelings against me. Yes, she did, I acknowledged. But you still made the choices, Marina. You still decided to lie to me, steal from me, and sleep with another man. Laya didn't force you to do any of that. Derek, meanwhile, was staring at Laya with a mixture of disgust and dawning realization. You played me. All of it was fake. The connection I felt with Marina, the way everything seemed to fall into place. The connection was real, Laya insisted. I just facilitated it by lying and manipulating and destroying people's lives. Derek shot back. Jesus Christ. Laya, what's wrong with you? That's when Laya completely lost it. She started screaming about how unfair everything was, how she'd been trying to help everyone, how we were all too stupid to see what was best for us. It was the tantrum of someone whose carefully constructed lies had finally collapsed. I pulled out my phone and showed them the screen, and that outburst is being recorded and will be added to the website as a bonus feature. The room went silent, except for Laya's heavy breathing. Marina wiped her eyes and looked at me with something that might have been respect. You planned all of this, she said. Every detail. The meeting. The evidence. The timing. I wanted all of you to understand exactly what you'd done and exactly what it was going to cost you. I walked to the door and turned back for one final look at the wreckage. Marina, the divorce papers are final. You'll get what the law requires, and not a penny more. Derek, enjoy explaining this to your remaining clients. And Laya, I smiled. Enjoy your new reputation. As I walked out into the cool evening air, I could hear them starting to argue again, their temporary alliance crumbling under the weight of mutual betrayal and blame. The website went live at exactly 8 p.m., and my phone immediately started buzzing with notifications as it spread through social media. By morning, everyone would know the truth about Laya Brennan and her web of lies. It wasn't justice exactly, but it was consequences, and sometimes consequences were enough. I drove away from the lakeside mansion for the last time, leaving behind the ruins of my marriage and the people who had destroyed it. The road ahead was dark and uncertain, but it was mine to travel. For the first time in months, that felt like enough.